Welcome to Military Comebacks. Today's story is one that reaches straight into the heart and reminds us that real honor isn't measured by rank, uniform, or age. It's about respect, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds formed through service. Stay until the end, because what happens when the general arrives changes everything you think you know about military tradition. Cold October rain poured without mercy, turning the parade ground into a sheet of gray reflecting the heavy sky above. At the base gate stood 73-year-old Margaret Chen, motionless, her thin jacket soaked through, silver hair clinging to her lined face. In her trembling hands she held a worn photograph, shielding it from the rain as though it were priceless. To her, it was. The young recruits on gate duty had their instructions, no civilians allowed beyond this point. Training operations underway. Visiting hours were tomorrow. She had heard it all before, yesterday, the day before, and the day before that. Different voices, same refusal. But tonight, she wasn't leaving. "Ma'am, you need to head home," Private First Class Jenkins said, his tone caught between firmness and unease. At 22, he was young enough to be her grandson, and he avoided her eyes. "You'll get sick out here." "I'll wait," Margaret replied quietly. There was no anger in her voice, only resolve forged long ago. Beside him, Private Rodriguez sighed. "You can't just show up demanding to see someone. There are rules. Chain of command. This is a military base." Margaret understood more than they ever could. She knew what it meant when a flag-covered coffin arrived at a front door. She knew the weight of a gold star in a window. She knew the sound a mother makes when she's told her child will never come home. She had lived all of it. Still, she said nothing. She simply stood in the rain, tears mixing with the downpour, clutching the photograph like an anchor to a past these boys were too young to imagine. Hours passed. Guards rotated. Word spread, elderly woman, won't leave, won't explain, just standing there. Some laughed awkwardly. Others shifted uncomfortably. No one stepped forward. Corporal Matthews muttered, "We can't let civilians hang around like this." "I called the duty officer," Jenkins replied. "He said to monitor her unless she tries to get through. Something about bad optics." Margaret almost smiled at that. Optics. As if appearances could be worse than absence. Worse than an empty seat at the table. Worse than a bedroom left untouched for decades. The photograph was creased with age. A young man in uniform smiled out from it, barely 18. Second Lieutenant James Chen, U.S. Army, 1st Infantry Division. He'd written every week from Vietnam, letters full of hope and love, until April 1968, when they stopped. The rain grew heavier. Margaret swayed slightly. Jenkins felt guilt tighten in his chest. He thought of his own grandmother standing in weather like this. "Ma'am," he tried again, softer. "Please wait in your car. The general's convoy is due soon." Margaret's head lifted sharply. The general? General Morrison. Inspection visit. Headlights cut through the rain. 3 black SUVs approached. The recruits snapped to attention. Jenkins felt dread sink into his stomach. The general would see everything. The vehicles stopped. General Richard Morrison stepped out, rain instantly darkening his dress uniform. His presence carried quiet authority earned through decades, not just rank. He took in the scene, the nervous soldiers, the soaked elderly woman, and his expression changed. "Sir, Jenkins began." Morrison raised a hand and walked straight to Margaret. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Then, with slow precision, he came to attention and delivered a perfect salute. "Gold Star Mother," he said, voice steady over the rain. "Ma'am, I'm sorry we kept you waiting." Margaret's hands trembled as she returned the salute, the photograph still between her fingers. Morrison's eyes fell on it. "James Chen," he said softly. "Second Lieutenant. Key San, April 1968. Pulled 3 wounded men to safety. Silver Star." His voice thickened. "I was one of those men, Mrs. Chen. I was 19. Your son saved my life." Silence fell over the parade ground. "I've searched for you for 40 years, Morrison continued. "Every lead failed. And now you're standing in the rain at my gate." Margaret's voice barely carried. "I just wanted to see where they train them now. Where boys learn to run toward danger. I wanted to understand why James made his choice. He made it because of you, Morrison said. His letters were filled with you, your strength, your courage. He died protecting others because you taught him some things matter more than safety. I taught him to come home, she whispered, grief breaking through decades of restraint. And he did, Morrison replied, touching his chest. In me. In every soldier he saved. In every life lived because of his sacrifice. He turned to his aide. Tomorrow at 0600, every recruit assembles in the auditorium. Mrs. Chen's story will be told. Her son's story will be told. Then gently, with your permission, ma'am, I'd like to establish the James Chen Memorial Scholarship for recruits who show his courage. I hope you'll present it each year. Margaret nodded through tears. May I get you out of the rain? Morrison asked, offering his arm. I owe you 40 years of thanks. As he led her to the car, the recruit stood frozen. Jenkins didn't hide his tears. They had just learned a lesson no manual could teach. Before entering the vehicle, Margaret looked back at the young soldiers. In their faces, she saw her son, their uncertainty, their potential, their capacity to grow into something greater. Thank you for your son, Morrison said quietly. Thank you for remembering him, she answered. The convoy drove away as the rain began to ease. Somewhere between memory and honor, between sacrifice and gratitude, a young lieutenant named James Chen was finally at peace. True honor doesn't need rank. True sacrifice asks for nothing. Heroes live on in the lives they save and the lessons they leave behind. That night, standing in the rain, Margaret Chen reminded an entire generation of soldiers what service truly means. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Subscribe to Military Comebacks for more stories honoring courage and sacrifice. And if you know a Gold Star family, take a moment to thank them, because heroes are never gone as long as we remember.